Pittsburgh Steelers fans, what's going on? This is Jeff Hartman, co-editor of BehindTheSteelCurtain.com, with you for another episode of the Steelers Preview every Thursday night. That's right. It's a triumphant trio. Myself, Dave Schofield, the other co-editor. What's going on, Dave? How are you tonight?
I'm good. It was a nice warm day to get outside.
That it was.
Almost got to 80 this weekend.
I almost got to 80 today in the Mid-Atlantic. Bryan Anthony Davis, our podcast producer. What's up, Bryan?
Indeed, it was a beautiful day, and more beautiful days are coming. It doesn't mean the meteorologist has to say so. All I know is it's going to get chaotic and crazy, and if you love football, it's happening, my friends.
The feeding frenzy that is free agency is upon us. It's right around the corner, the tampering period, which I think it's hysterical, by the way, when people will say, the tampering period's only been going on for a few years. Legal tampering has only been going on for a few years. Tampering has been going on for a lot longer than a few years, but that starts on the 15th. That's Monday. And then the 17th of March is the first official day of the new league year. Now, since the last time we were on, we'll brush up on the fact that the news of the week was that the salary cap was set 182.5. Am I right, guys? That's what the number was?
182.5.
Yes. Okay. Dave, you wrote the article, ran this morning, Thursday morning on BehindTheSteelCurtain.com, your one-stop shop for all things Pittsburgh Steelers. How much space do the Steelers have, Dave? Tell us that before we talk about anything else. Go.
Okay, right now they have a little over $6 million in space, and the reason I'm not going to get into an exact dollar amount. It could be, the two sources that I use, overthecap.com and SpotTrack, they both have subtle differences. They have a few contracts that aren't, where they're estimating things that they're not exactly the same, but those are the two sources. They're both over 6 million. And there is other things that the Steelers are going to have to spend their money on. I laid that out in the article. Things like signing their draft picks, the 52nd and 53rd player come September, the practice squad, that counts on the salary cap. So you got to, and the question is, are they going to go back to the 12 man that it was supposed to be right now? Or did they like the whole notion of the 16? That's something that would be interesting to see what the NFL does. And of course, then you also have the Steelers need to have some money left over to pay some players. Because if someone gets injured, they still count on the salary cap. Unless they get waived, injured, or something like that. And then they have to bring in somebody else to replace them. So you got to have money to do that. So even though they have that 6 million, they're going to be spending most of that, but you don't have to worry about that now. That's stuff that you're not going to need until at least May. So you got that 6 million now, and you could create a little bit more now, or you could wait and create more later to pay for those things. So that's what they got. That's what they got to do. So they can still sign a couple guys even before next Wednesday and still be okay.
Okay, Bryan, let me ask you this question. The Steelers are going to have to create more cap space if they want to be considered buyers in free agency, even if it's just for one player. How do they do that? Do they restructure more deals? Do you think there are players that get cut? Because we know that the release tracker on Behind the Steel Curtain has been going crazy. Like the New Orleans Saints cut like half their roster because they were cap hell. Bryan, how are you creating space?
You know what? I like the idea of looking anywhere you could find it. I think they're going to be reluctant to drop anybody right now. I don't think they want to. If they have to, they're going to. The guys that they're going to be looking at to drop the top two guys that they don't want to, but probably number one and number two that will be looked at would be Vinny Vici, Vince Williams, or Joe Hayden. They're going to do everything they can to not do that. I know, I get it, but they're going to try. But those are probably guys that they look at because you're not going to drop a guy that is on their rookie deal to move some space. They're going to look under the couch cushions. They're going to do whatever they can. Hey, look, we said this last year. Here's my Steeler wallet. All right. Even though it's empty, they find a way. Omar Khan could find a way. I said it before. If I could hire him to come into my house for a week to help my wife balance the budget, I would. There's always a way. So you can figure it out that way. I mean, I know Dave was shaking his head on the Joe Hayden thing, but that stuff is a possibility that they could look at. I don't think they're going to. But if there's somebody else on the list that I'm missing,
I
Throw it
got
out.
one that I would put as the in the top. If you want to do top two, I think the Steelers are going to manage to keep everybody. That's just what I'm going with. That they can make it work. Because think about it. In essence, they kind of cut two people, but they didn't because they had two retirements. Much like last year, not that I think that they would have cut Pouncey, but that takes away another cut you would have done. Vance McDonald, they might have cut. Last year, they did not cut Ramon Foster. He retired. He might have been a cut otherwise. But because of those two retirements, you have other things to do. I'm going to say it's one that might shock you because you're going to say, well, then who's going to play there? And that is, it could be Eric Ebron, to save some money. And you're like, well, who's going to play tight end? But right now, if you cut Joe Hayden, who's going to play safety? It's the same kind of boat with guys that aren't very experienced because their other options aren't signed either. So I don't know that that's going to be the way to go. I also don't know that I don't think they're going to restructure anyone between now and the start of the league year unless the NFL announces what's going on with the 17th game, because I think that's what they really need in order to do Stephon Tuitt's. Because if you look at it, was it today or yesterday when the wide receiver for Houston, Brandon Cooks, he got restructured and they gave him more money. And they're like, well, that's not very common. Well, the reason they did that, I think, is because he had a contract under the old CBA and he was set to lose money by restructuring. So they made up that difference. So those are things that they're trying to figure out. They got things that they can do. They definitely have things that they can do. And it's not, the sky is not falling like many people thought it was. They've already shred over $40 million, including what was the carryover than what it was going to be. So I think they're in decent shape.
So players, they could still restructure. They could restructure Stephon Tuitt's contract. They could do Chris Boswell's, I believe. They could also extend play. Huh? That's it. They could extend a player like Joe Hayden, Steven Nelson. Ebron's another one. Yeah. So they have options. I think that's the way, that's the mode of getting the number a little bit higher in terms of cap space than it is cutting players, but that's just my own personal prerogative. All right, let's get to the headline of this podcast, which is what surprises await the Steelers in the new league year. This is not necessarily our bold predictions, which we did during the regular season, but really what surprises do you see happening with the Steelers when free agency rolls around? Because remember, the next time we are on a show together, the Steelers, we're going to be in day 3 of free agency. I'm sorry, day 2 technically. And it's going to be, you're still going to have moves being made, but a lot of that stuff's already going to be done. Bryan, if you were to give us one surprise that you think could happen with the Steelers in free agency, what is it?
I'm thinking that they keep somebody that you don't really expect, somebody that they weren't really talking about as much, and that would be somebody like a Matt Filer, where a lot of people right now aren't thinking that he is a big priority because he falls under the Chris Hubbard type situation from a few years back, where he's probably going to be valuable to a team like the Browns who took Hubbard, or somebody like that could get him and overpay him, kind of like Finney was overpaid last year. That didn't quite work out for the Seahawks, but I could see a guy like that could be a priority to another team that the Steelers say, okay, we're going to keep you just as an insurance policy and maybe get them a lot cheaper than you would think they normally would. Because right now, with the axe falling on a lot of teams, you mentioned New Orleans earlier. We just saw two starting linemen for the Super Bowl runner-up Kansas City Chiefs and last year's Super Bowl champion go out. There's going to be a lot of guys out there, and I think there's going to be a lot of cheaper alternatives where these guys aren't going to get the money that they normally would get in free agency because there is going to be so much volume out there.
What about you, Dave? What's your surprise?
My biggest surprise, first and foremost, I have to say, is that we have a Dennis Sheridan sighting in the live chat. How's it going, Dennis? Haven't seen you in a long time. Glad to see you here. Just had to do that one. A lot of people were chiming in saying, hey, Dennis, good to see you. So my biggest surprise is that I'm kind of along the lines of Bryan, but I honestly think the biggest surprise is going to be that they're not going to cut anyone to do what they have to do. I think you might see an extension, like one player extension by next Wednesday, really is going to buy them a lot if it was either a Hayden or a Nelson. Lots of people keep talking about Joe Hayden. That's one in my deepest heart of hearts. Not only do I not want to see it, I don't think it's going to happen just because I've heard too much of how they value him and what he does from guys like a Jerry Dulock that's really in tune with some of the things that go on. That's the only reason that I've kind of dismissed the notion of Joe Hayden, because of something that some of those people have said. I think your biggest surprise is that let's go with this. The Steelers can't keep either one of their two free agent corners.
I could see that happening. I want
them to, but I for some reason, I would be surprised if they don't keep one of them, and it just might not happen.
My surprise is going to tie in with Steel Dog 88, who gave us $2. He says the surprise is signing of John Brown, who publicly stated on Thursday today that he would like to go to the Steelers. He listed two teams. Number one was the Steelers. The second was the Indianapolis Colts. Take that for what it's worth. That's just what he's saying. It doesn't mean the Steelers are interested or anything like that. But nonetheless, I am going to go out on a limb and say that my surprise is that the Steelers are going to be bigger buyers than people ever thought. I think that this is the year of the cheap veteran contract, the cheap veteran 1-year deal. I told us you were going to say that, weren't you, Dave?
No, I did. It jogged something else in my brain of what I should have said. So I think yours, I want to throw it out.
So I think it's a situation where you might get John Brown on a 1-year deal for a cheap 1-year deal. And it's a deal that the Steelers could manage, that they'd be glad to have, because John Brown is going to be looking, and a lot of other veterans, I'm just using him as an example, are going to try to use this as almost like a catapult into 2022, where everything is expected to rebound. They're saying that the salary cap could be over $200 million in 2022. Think about how much space teams will have, and those veterans could be seeing big contracts, especially if they play well. So all these players that you've been seeing getting cut, and there's going to be more. There's going to be a lot more over the weekend and getting ready for next week in the new league year. I think the Steelers are going to grab a couple of these more so than you think. That's my surprise. Go ahead, Dave. What were you going to say?
What I should have said, and it didn't dawn on me until just now. Since the Steelers opened this can of worms, something they had never done until Ben Roethlisberger's contract, watch them use some void years with somebody. Like, if you want to get a player, like you say, like a 1-year deal, if you really want to make it work under the salary cap, you throw 2 void years onto the end of their contract, and you give them a big signing bonus, and you're really only having, other than their base salary, a third of that signing bonus count this year. You could see them maybe use void years for somebody else. Other teams do it all the time. Like I said, Javon Hargrave had void years on his contract. He signed with Philly last year. So it wouldn't be surprised just to get around what is the 2021 season. I might have messed it up and said 2020. The 2021 season, that they could maybe use that in order to say, hey, it might be kicking the can a little bit, but it's going to at least get us in the right direction.
Okay. Bryan, any other surprises on your side?
You mentioned it. This season, you could basically say the entire NFL, for a lot of these veterans, it's going to be sponsored by Enterprise Rent-A-Car or Rent-A-Center, because you're going to have so many 1-year deals that when you said that, Jeff, about the 1-year deal, there's going to be so many of them. There's going to be a record of 1-year deals. You're going to see guys it's going to look like the hockey trading deadline, the baseball trading deadline, when guys are there for just a couple months. You're going to see guys in a uniform for a record 1 year. So when you're looking at proreference.com or their trading card, they're going to have that one lone year of Pittsburgh or Seattle or wherever, because so many are going to have to do that to set up, like Dave said, 2022, because there's not enough space. And you're seeing the downfall. You're seeing guys falling like crazy right now. They're going to come back. They got to be patient and bet on themselves for 1 year.
Let me ask you a follow-up here, Bryan. So do you think that if everything happens the way that I laid it out and the way that you projected in terms of these influx of 1-year contracts, do you foresee NBA super teams happening where players are like, hey, we're free agents. Let's all go to the Steelers and let's see if we can win a ring. And the Steelers are like, sure. I mean, do you think that could happen in the NFL, or do you think that there's too much parity for that to happen?
I think there is definitely too much parity. We saw the attempt at the super team in 2000 with Dan Snyder bringing in guys like Deion Sanders, Bruce Smith, Andre Reed. I mean, he brought in everybody. Tony and I did the retro show on the last game at Three River Stadium, and that was at the end of that year where everything went wrong for that team. And it doesn't work in the NFL like it could in the NBA, because you're putting three superstars on the court with 5 spots to start. You really can't do that here. Now, the Browns are going to try to do that right now. The Browns are going to try to get throw a lot of money at some guys because they have a lot of space. But with chemistry and teams, you need pieces of the puzzle. I'll never forget back in 1998 when in 2008, when the Washington football team brought in a prized free agent that ended up not working out. And somebody came on Washington radio and said, why can't more teams be like the Patriots, be more like the Steelers, and get those piece of the puzzle guys? Because too many superstars don't work. They clash.
What do you think, Dave? What do you think about all these 1-year deals?
It's interesting because 1-year deals don't help with the salary cap. They really don't. What really is better is deals that are spread out more to where that first year is low and then you're paying higher, which is honestly, believe it or not, is a really good setup for this year. You get that, you sign that guy, the first year's lower because you're giving them so much of a signing bonus that's spreading out later. And then you worry about bigger base salaries in future years, not in this year. The problem with that is, and this is why I mentioned the whole void years thing, because for those of you that don't understand how that works, if teams still might want to do that concept where you get that discounted first year, but they can't work out how much to give in a base salary in future years based on, is the cap going to explode? And that's why they'd rather do that and spread that money out, but then not be tied into a set base salary that they have with these players. And the players might not want to settle for a lower base salary, which is a kind of what Bryan's talking about, because you're talking about the salary cap now. And are teams going to be really willing to say, oh, let's have this explode over the next few years? Now, the Cowboys kind of did that with Dak Prescott, because to round off the numbers, he's $22 million this year, $33 million next year, and $44 million the following year when it comes to the salary cap, is the way they structured that. So it could be that because of the TV deals, teams will be willing to do that. I don't know that the Steelers are going to be one of those teams. So that's where it gets tricky. And it's kind of the whole reason of like, why bother to do the void years with Ben Roethlisberger? Why not give him a base salary? The problem was figuring out what number is going to be happy for both sides when it comes time to actually happen, a year from now, 2 years from now, things like that. So there's a lot of different ways you could do it. If you're set on a player, like if the Steelers set on a player, like this could be a guy that could be with us long-term, sign him to that longer deal and have that first year be really low. The question is, how sure are they?
Okay, so let's talk about positions, and not necessarily specific prospects, but positions. We're talking about free agency. If you were to go outside the Steelers, so we're not talking about keeping any of their own guys or anything like that. We'll do that in a second. If you could pick one outside free agent position, what position would that be? Bryan, I'll let you go first.
A lot of people are probably thinking on the offensive line on this one. I'm looking more at running back, and it might seem crazy. I kind of think that right now you bring in a running back, and you could possibly do that with some of these guys that might cost a little less. I mean, I'm not talking the Aaron Jones situation, because that guy's going to end up, his market's going to be driven up. But there's some guys that you can get and pull in and do pretty well with. So I'm looking at the running back spot.
Okay. Dave, what about you?
To comment on what Bryan said, I would definitely be for that. But this is what I'm not for. I'm not for bringing in a veteran running back and using a first round draft pick on a running back. I don't want them to do both, one or the other. So if they do that, and I mean, if you're bringing in a bottom guy that's not much more than the league minimum, that's a different story. But if you're bringing in someone like, an Aaron Jones would be more. If you're talking, it depends on what they sign for, if you know what I mean. So if you think you want to go high running back in the draft, don't bother doing that. That's just my opinion, the way I feel about it. So I'm going to go with the offensive line. And what's interesting is you think I would probably say center. I know Michael Beck is like center. Believe it or not, I think if you're going to get a center, you're pay for it because you need it that bad. But if you want something that's on the low end, you could probably get a low end quality tackle to help you bridge the gap there.
I am going to go with center, like Michael Beck would, because I think that, again, you did this with the running back comment, and it ties in with the NFL draft and their team needs. If they can find a center, I don't care if it's someone like Alex Mack, who might only have a few years left in his career. If you can just get that guy, and I've said it a million times on my Let's Ride podcast, get me a Jeff Harding's type. He's at the end of his career, a wily veteran that can come in and just kind of fill that gap, and then eventually when the draft class brings a prospect that is like a Marquise Pouncey that could start from day one. There's not one of those in this draft class. And so people are like, oh, just go draft a center. It doesn't work that way. I think all the best centers will be there on day 2 or day 3, rounds 2 or 3 this year. And so you could still draft a center, maybe rounds 2 or 3. And if you get that free agent, now you've freed up other options in round 1. I love some of the running backs that are in this draft class. I'm not sure if I like them in the first round. I love some of the tackles that are in this draft class, and what they do in free agency will dictate what they do in the draft. We talk about that all the time. So I'm going to throw another one out there. I want you guys to.
I was going to say, because I had a follow-up question too. That I was going to ask.
Sure, go ahead.
This is real quick. Would you rather get that one big free agent that's going to be a starter for you for several years, 2 or 3 years, or would you rather sign 4 or 5, depth key, low profile guys? How would you rather do it with this? If you're the Steelers, seeing what, when we're talking, might not even be by next Thursday. It might even have to be the next one. That did the Steelers make the one big signing, or did they make several small ones?
I would be like, if it's a center, give me the center and be done. I'm fine with that. Like, if you give me the center, I'm like, hey, you did your job, guys. Kudos. Let's get ready for the draft. You have 8 picks. I figure they're going to at least hit a couple of them out of the park. Brian, what do you think?
You know what? I love the idea of a center, and the center that I'm looking at, of course, I think he's way too expensive, but Green Bay's Lindsley is absolutely incredible. That's a guy, you bring him in, I'm thinking you're getting 5-6 plus out of him. So that's he would be worth it if you do have the money. There are some centers out there that you can bring in, and they don't have to start right away, but you're going to want to bridge the gap, because you don't want to. Do you really want to start the season with JC?
No.
So you probably don't. Now, to answer Dave's question, though, there's some guys out there that I would like to bring in for 2 years to help stabilize the team. And I think if you're looking at the wide receiver position, and they don't have to draft a wide receiver high, but if you're bringing in a guy like a Brown or an Amendola, and a guy that can still get you 60 catches, you could bring him in cheap. I don't know how much Golden Tate's going to cost, but if you can get a veteran on the cheap, help stabilize those young receivers as far as be a locker room guy. And even a Larry Fitzgerald, man, if you can get a Larry Fitzgerald, I don't think he's really wanting to go anywhere. But you bring a guy in like that, you bring a few on the cheap. Somebody mentioned even a running back, an Adrian Peterson or a Frank Gore, and everyone's like, oh, those guys are so old and everything. If you brought a guy in for $1 million a year while you're drafting somebody, drafting somebody high or getting them in a position where they can help bridge the gap. Because remember, that window, now that you signed Ben Roethlisberger, that window might be open for another year, that you might be doing what you did in 2020, in 2021 to try to bring a ring right now. And I think if you're asking Kevin Colbert, Mike Tomlin, and Omar Khan, and Mr. Rooney, what you're trying to do, I think they are they're trying to win a ring now. And I'm not saying jeopardize the future, but not really look too deep into the future.
If there's a position that, go ahead, David.
I was going to say, I want to answer my own question. Can I do that?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. Okay. The thing is, the answer relies on which position you want to do, whether it's Bryan or you. Because I'm actually sold now that you guys are right with the running back or center. And the part of the reason I think of that is I would like the Steelers to draft a center, but not in the first round. I would like the Steelers to draft a running back, but not in the first round. But they can't take both of them in the second round unless they're trading around to do it. So to me, it's you either go get the center, and that's your one big signing, or you try to get a decent running back and maybe a couple other guys with the same amount of money. And then you're focusing on center and not running back, or running back and not center in the draft.
If there's a position that I would be 100% behind them going out and getting, even if it's a lower tier free agent, and unfortunately I can't think of anyone off the top of my head, it would be pass rusher. If they were to be able to find an edge rusher that is
just also
not
expensive.
That's the thing. I mean, if everyone's like, well, you got Bud Dupree. Well, you're not going to be able to afford Bud Dupree. I'm thinking of someone, and Bryan, you did the articles. I don't know
if
you're
good, they're going to cost a ton. And if they're not good, why do you want them?
Yeah, no, it's just one of those positions that a lot of people aren't going to think of. Tight end's another one. Maybe if there's a tight end floating around, Kyle Rudolph, again, how much is he going to cost? I know a lot of people have talked Zach Ertz and stuff like that. I'm not sure if that's the answer, but still, there are some positions that the Steelers could target in free agency that might not be the center, running back, wide receiver that everyone is accustomed to. Let's do one more, though. I can't get over the fact that Art Rooney II said when he met with media at the end of the season, they're going to add to the quarterback room. So do the Steelers pick up some schmuck quarterback off the streets when we know it's not going to be a high-profile free agent pickup? Do they add to the quarterback room? Do they draft it? What do you think about that? I still can't forget that he said that, and I believe that means something. Dave, we'll start with you.
Okay. I know some people are like, oh, maybe the Steelers should take a flyer on a mid-round quarterback, see if you can find was Russell Wilson a third? Was he a third?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Dak Prescott was a fourth. If you could find someone like that. I'm like, the Steelers don't need to do that. Do you want to know why? They took their flyer. Their flyer was bringing in Haskins. So you don't need to do that. You really want to know what I think? Did Art Rooney make that comment? Was that before or after the Haskins? That's what I couldn't remember.
They had already picked him up, I believe.
Okay. I think you're going to either see them bring back on the cheap, if they can, someone like a Josh Dobbs, or you're going to think I'm crazy, undrafted free agent when the draft is done, because they're going to need a fourth body for sure, if not a fifth. So that's what I think they're going to go. To me, it's like I said last year with running back. This is how I would say quarterback this year. Go big or go home. Either go get the guy that's your future guy, or don't waste the capital and just have another guy that's depth.
I agree with that. What about you, Bryan? What do you think?
You've got to understand Art 2's comments when he made them. Everything with Ben Roethlisberger was up in the air. It was in flux. They did not know whether he was coming back. So quite possibly, meaning that we're going to have to add somebody to the quarterback locker room, quarterback room, it could have been Ben Roethlisberger. Because think about this. Now that, they're going to bring in an undrafted free agent, I don't even think they're going to draft one now unless they go big, like if they do the Jeff Hartman dream and trade up. And which I love that dream. I mean, I think that's great. I just don't think and I caution them, you don't want to get JP Lozman. You don't want to get Artie Burns just because they've got those two letters next to their name. It says QB, and they say, we're going to go ahead and pick up Jeff Hartman in the 7th round, and not realizing that he is he is a balding ex-cornerback from the Wheeling area that had 1 pick six in middle school. So
it's one more than most. Just to make that clear.
I never had a pick six.
I just don't think that. I think those comments are outdated. I really think they are, because they're now knowing that they've got. If you bring somebody in as an undrafted free agent or as a free agent, then you're saying that, well, I've got to get rid of either Mason Rudolph or Dwayne Haskins. And so, you know what? Maybe they don't want Haskins. Maybe he's just in there to see if he sticks against the wall. But now they're in a situation that they have been back for another year. They know that Mason's here for 1 year, unless they have some kind of designs on trading him. But we talked about that last week with what kind of value does he actually have? And he doesn't. He doesn't have a lot of value. He has more value to the Steelers than he does with anybody else. So when you're looking at this whole situation, those comments that he made at the end of January, early February, they probably don't hold as much water now. So when they're talking about bringing in a guy to add to that quarterback room, Dave is on the money. It's an undrafted free agent at this position. You're not going to throw money at Fitzpatrick. You're not going to throw money at Winston or anybody like that, because you're just not set up this year to have that battle, because the design is to have Ben for hopefully 16 games. And if you only have him for 12,
17.
Make 17. And thank you, Mr. Correctorson. And
Correcting me.
And is it official yet? Is that completely official?
No, that's why that's holding up so much business, believe it or not.
Okay, so when I go back and produce the show, I'll cut that part out, and no one will ever hear this again. So, really, I don't know what I was trying to say when Dave had to make sure.
You said they want Ben Roethlisberger for 16 or 17 games.
And if he can't be in there, it's going to be Mason Rudolph for right now, because you're going to use him for his extra year. And if he has to play, then you're going to find out if he has a future beyond Ben. That's what they're looking to do.
Can I piggyback off what Bryan said for 30 seconds?
30 seconds, go.
One, you're right, because if you really want to see if Haskins is the guy, you need to give him more than training camp and let him be a number 3, if nothing else. That means you have your 3 quarterbacks. Okay, that's why you don't want to do a lot. But when it comes to the Steelers with the draft this year, it's one of if you want to go big with a quarterback, it's one of those things that you prepare for, you just don't plan on. It would have to fall for you in the right way.
I'm going to go out on the record and say that I think they do need to prioritize trying to get Joshua Dobbs back, because if Haskins does not pan out, let's say he stinks and he's preseason's awful, you do want someone with experience that would be able to function well in the Matt Canada offense and knows the system. Dobbs fits the bill, would be a good QB3. I think they need to prioritize that. But you know what we're going to do is we're going to give you some predictions for some of these free agents coming up right after this break. So if you're on our audio side, head over to part 2, because we're going to give you all the predictions on what we think is going to happen with the Steelers free agents. If you're watching live on Facebook or on YouTube, stay tuned. We're not going anywhere. All right, Pittsburgh Steelers fans, welcome back to the second part of the Steelers preview. I'm Jeff Hartman, co-editor of BehindTheSteelCurtain.com. Joining me, as always, Dave Schofield, the other co-editor, and Bryan Anthony Davis, the podcast producer. We just talked about positions and thoughts and surprises. What I wanted to do here is I wanted to go over just some of the players, not all of them. And you might be like, Jeff, why are you leaving some of these players out? I'll give you an example. I'm going to leave Bud Dupree off. Why? Because I don't think anyone on here in their right mind thinks they have any prayer of getting Bud Dupree to stay in Pittsburgh. Am I right, Bryan? Do you agree? Dave, you agree?
The safest bet in Vegas.
Okay, so I'm going to leave some of these guys off. But for those that are going to be, do they keep them or do they not? We're going to see where you all see with some of these players. You all ready to go?
Yep.
Let's do offense first. Let's start with Matt Filer. This is someone that you brought up earlier, Bryan. I'll start with you. Did they keep him or is he gone? What do you think?
A week ago, I was going to say he was gone. I'm starting to think that they might make room for him if he is at the right price. So I'll go on the limb and say keep.
All right, Dave.
Then I'll go against him and I'll say he's probably gone. He's a guy that if he comes back to the Steelers, it's going to be a week into free agency because he doesn't get any interests other places.
I am going to say that his versatility is going to be the death knell for the Steelers trying to get him back. I think he's going to get an offer that he can't turn down. The only way he stays is if he says, I really want to stay in Pittsburgh. You all gave me a shot, and I'm going to, that's not going to happen. I think he's gone. Let's go with Zach Banner as the next one. Bryan, we'll start with you. Same rotation.
Absolutely. I think he's back 100%.
Okay, Dave, you agree or disagree?
Yeah, I'm just waiting to see him on Twitter again because he says he's done until he signs his contract, and I thought he might have been done for a few hours, maybe. But I think you're going to see a similar deal from last time. It's another bet on himself, and say, here it is. I'm fine after the injury, and I'm going to show what I can do.
I think Banner is back. Mainly because they couldn't keep Filer. Here's a quick question, a quick sidebar. If you had to choose one or the other, would you keep Filer or would you keep Banner? Bryan, who would you take?
I'm keeping Banner.
Okay, Dave?
I'm actually keeping Banner too because one, I think he's less expensive, and well, I don't know. I mean, if they're going to move him back to tackle, Filer was pretty good out there too, but I think it's more of a money issue.
If I were to bring back Filer, it would basically be because I want him at tackle. I'm not interested in him at guard. You have DeCastro, you have Dotson. I have no interest in you being in the interior, going back out on the edge. And maybe that's not what he wants to do, but that's neither here nor there. All right, let's go over the big one. Juju Smith-Schuster. Bryan, what do you think?
I think he's 100% gone.
Okay. Dave?
I'm not 100% on that one, but I just think it's not going to work out. I keep wearing the hat almost every show now. I did it on Tuesday. I'm wearing it as long as I can. I told you guys before the show, they need to do more players of hats like this because I would buy so many of these. But I threw something out into our Slack channel earlier today. I'm like, do you think Juju would stay in Pittsburgh for one more year with Ben for $13 million? Because if you think he'd do $13 million, you give him a $1 million base contract, and then you give him the rest of the signing bonus, and you give him 2 void years, and that only costs $5 million on this year's salary cap, and that's the $5 million that Ben Roethlisberger left on the table. And there you go. You said that the Steelers do what they had to do. It would stink to have another $8 million that they'd have to eat the following year, but if you're really going for it this year, that's something they could do. I just don't know that they're going to work that out.
What's really tough for me is, and this is something else, a discussion that happened on our Slack channel, that we were talking about how bad Randy Fichtner's offense was and how much did that play a role into Juju's style of play, we'll put it that way, or his opportunities that were presented to him last season. But I just don't think he stays. I think he still has value. And I think there's teams that are going to want to bring him in. I mean, you think about someone like the Chargers. The Jets have been a topic. People have talked about the Jets, the Jaguars. I could see him going to any of those places, but I think he's gone.
Hey, real quick, my kids, especially my family, hates the Slack channel because this time of year, all they hear is bling, bling.
Turn your notifications off.
They're like, what's going on? I'm like, Michael and Jeffrey have something to say.
All right, let's go to James Conner. For the life of me, I cannot think about where he might end up. I personally don't think he ends up in Pittsburgh. Bryan, what do you think?
I don't see it happening at all. Unless he wants to take a very low deal, I just don't see it happening. We're hearing rumors about Miami right now being interested in James Conner. Dreams go to die when it comes to running backs in Miami. But I really don't. I mean, I love the story. I love the guy. I just don't think number 30 is back in black and gold.
Dave?
Like we've said about so many other players in the past, we haven't said it much this year unless I haven't been paying attention. It only takes one team that thinks that they could really do something to offer them that deal for them to be gone. That's what just one team needs to look at and say, oh, we think James Conner can do better here because, one, he had a terrible offensive coordinator and he didn't have much of a run-blocking offensive line, and he was a Pro Bowler in 2018. They might take that flyer. Chances are, out of 31 other teams, one of them will, and that's why I just don't know which team it'll be.
Yeah, I trying to draw up his market is difficult, but I think he's gone for sure. All right, and this is neither offense nor defense, but I have to bring him up. Jordan Berry is an unrestricted free agent. All right, so if you want to hear my thoughts, if I have
Is Jeff frozen?
actually talked about in my performance, and I spent so much time on Jordan Berry talking about my theory on why he stinks. But guys, Bryan, what do you think about Jordan Berry? Does he come back?
If he does, he's going to have camp competition. They're going to, just like they brought in Colquitt to oust him. They're going to do everything they can to find something better, but they're going to give him a cheapy deal. And I agree with everything Dave says about it takes one team. I just don't think it's going to take one team. I don't think there's going to be any teams really lining up for the services of Jordan Berry. They could. They didn't really last year until the Steelers called him back. So, if they want to give him the veteran minimum and see if he sticks, and he might get cut if they see something better. But you still have Waitman that you can bring in as well, that spent all that time on the practice squad last season. So there's a possibility, but yeah, I think they bring him back, but it's just, I think it's short term. I don't think he's the leg of the future.
Dave, Jordan Berry, yay, nay?
He is absolutely going to be in training camp.
Ugh.
The only way he's not is if it's not for the league minimum. And the Steelers should not offer him any more than the league minimum. One, because it's 2021. And two, because exactly what Bryan pointed out is that last year when he was released by the Steelers and so many teams were keeping punters on their practice squad, he landed nowhere. 31 teams passed. So the Steelers brought him back and he punted well. Maybe a team takes a flyer after that. I doubt it. I think he comes back in training camp, but once again, his job is not secure, and I'm fine with that. I think best punter wins, but the way he punted when he came back last year, he at least earned the rights to come back at a veteran minimum to try to win the job. And if someone's going to pay him more than the vet minimum, take him.
You have to listen to Let's Ride for my little rant on Jordan Berry. I have a whole theory as to why he's awful, but I do think he'll be back. I agree with you guys that they'll probably bring him back. He'll be in camp. Whether he makes a team is a different story. Let's go over to defense.
Wait, you missed one.
Who did I miss?
Big Al.
Yeah, well, does anyone see him coming back? I thought he was kind of one of those that was kind of a given that he was gone.
Well,
I don't
think it's a given. I just can't believe how much money he's, I thought he was going to retire. And then all of a sudden, everyone's talking about all this money he could make. I'm like, if he just wants to play another year, make a whole bunch of money somewhere else and be set up better for life, more power to him.
Yeah, I mean, he was one of those guys I just felt like it was pretty obvious that they're not going to bring him back, but we'll see. So Bud Dupree is another one of those. Let's talk about Mike Hilton. This is a tough one. Bryan, what do you think?
I want him to come back. I don't see him coming back. He is one of the top slot corners in the game. Somebody's throwing the frog skins at this guy.
Dave?
Well, it probably didn't do him any favors when all of a sudden, I can't remember his name, but the slot corner who was supposedly one of the best in the league in Detroit was released today. That's not something. That's not going to do Hilton any favors. But at the same time, he is not your typical slot corner. All it takes is for him to go, is for a team that has money to say, we want to implement him in this way like they did in Pittsburgh, and then he's going to go. But there's got to be that team that wants to do it. And if a team thinks they're going to sign him and have him be a typical slot corner, it's going to be an El Busto sign. I mean, I'm really sorry about that, Mike Hilton. We love you. Steelers Nation loves you, but it's because of the way they use you. And if you're not going to be used that way with another team, you can make your money, but you just might not have the success. So I think that one's a 50-50. I'm probably leaning towards someone's going to pay him and they're not going to be able to afford him.
Yeah, I agree. I think that Hilton's gone. unfortunately, but this guy, he's kind of been kicked around. You know, if you think about his entry into the league as an undrafted player, and then he was like a restricted free agent, exclusive rights free agent. I'm not sure if that was the order or not, but still, everyone's like, oh, maybe this is the year Hilton gets a deal. Maybe this is the year. No, he was paying for like $2 million or less. So
he made over $2 million last year. No, it was over $3 million. He was a second round tender.
I think he's going to cash in. I think he gets his payday, but it's not going to be in Pittsburgh. So let's go on the flip side of that. Let's go Cam Sutton. Bryan, what do you think?
I actually think they try to bring this guy back.
But do they?
Yeah. Okay. I actually think they do.
Good. Dave?
It's interesting because, some of the projections, I even looked at like PFF, that they take their top 50 players and where they think they're going to go, their free agents. They updated it today, and they still had Mike Hilton going back to the Steelers at $4 million a season. They said 3 years, $12 million. I'm like, I see Mike Hilton getting more than that, but I could see the Steelers paying that same amount for Cam Sutton.
Okay, yeah, I can see that. Here's another tough one. Tyson Alualu. What do you think, Bryan?
I actually think they do bring him back. I think at his age, being 34, I know some teams could offer him something. I think he is a high priority free agent if the Steelers could find some room to bring him back. I don't think that they're looking at a Mondo or a Bugs to really fill in that position full time. They would have to go ahead and get somebody else, and for the money that they would have to get somebody else to bring in, they could probably keep Tyson Alualu.
Dave, what do you think?
Here's the thing. You want to know a shocker? Here, bold prediction. Tyson Alualu actually decides to hang it up because of his age. I don't think that's going to happen. I want him back. I want him back with the Steelers next year. You can't take for granted what this guy means. He is just a good dude. He is just a good person, a good guy to have around, someone that could just, he doesn't have to be the big captain, everything else, but just a good, solid person to keep around. He had a career year last year. In my opinion, I would like to see him back. I just don't know that they can pay him like a player that just is coming off a career year. That's the issue. So if he goes, it better be for a lot of money, because if it's for average money, he better be with the Steelers.
I think he stays. I think that I go back to when he signed, because people forget, he was picked up by Pittsburgh in free agency, and then he signed a second contract with the Steelers. And he talked about how like the Steelers gave him like a new lease on life, and he really loved the Steelers. I think he gives them the best chance to bring him back. I think that he might even take less to stay. If there's one guy that's not Zach Banner, because he's betting on himself, as he calls it, that'll take a hometown discount, I think it's Tyson Alualu. And if he stays, that's a huge get for the Steelers in free agency, because then the defensive line doesn't need as much attention. And he's coming off a really good year. So let's just do an either or here. These two players, Sean Davis, Jordan Dangerfield, both free agents. Do they keep either? Do they keep one, or do they lose both? What do you think, Bryan?
One, and it's Dangerfield. He is a special teams demon, and that's what he's there for. If you look at his PFF, and if you look at the free agent market watch, when we did safeties, he didn't play really much as a safety last year for the Steelers. He played so much as special teams, and that's why they would retain him.
Okay, Dave?
100% agree. Wouldn't be shocked to see Sean Davis back at an El Cheapo deal, but I'm telling you, that's a May signing, if anything else. You let him go out there and you test that market anywhere you want, just like last year when he left and went to Washington and then came back after he got cut. I feel the same way about Sean Davis again. That's not someone you have to grab right now. Let him go see what he can get, and then say you can come back here for a cheap deal anytime you want.
All right, real quick, before we get to trivia and our final thoughts, guys, on a scale from 1 to 10, 10 being I have supreme confidence, 1 being I have no confidence at all. What's your confidence rate of the Steelers heading into free agency? Bryan, we'll start with you.
I am looking at a 7 for the Steelers right now.
Wow. I feel like that's kind of high.
Well, I actually think it's a 7 with the arrow pointing up. I was actually going to give you a 7.5, but I don't want to do that to you. But now I'm throwing it out there.
Okay. Dave Schofield, what about you?
Well, I wasn't that far off. I was going 6. I was going to go 6 because, they can still make other moves. I mean, Ben Roethlisberger didn't take a $5 million cut for the Steelers to do nothing. He didn't take a $5 million pay cut for them to not sign any of their guys or not bring in anybody. He did not do that. So, because he'd been better off just going or saying, I'll just take my money if you're not going to add anybody, and then ride off into the sunset. So they got to do something. So that's why I got a 6. They're not going to make the big splash unless it's to bring in that center. And I really think soon you're going to see not the restructures. Like I say, I still think they're going to have to hold off onto it unless they work out to give them that little bit of extra money, which I don't know that they want to. I think you're going to see an extension to one or both of the corners to help pay for stuff. I'm
the eternal optimist, and right now I'm giving him a 5. I just think that I need to see what they do. I want to see the free agency moves, who they lose, who they retain. I want to see what the draft looks like. If they can have a good draft, if they can get some players, add some positions, depth, and maybe a starter like center, then my confidence rating will go up. But right now, it's about a 5, just to be completely honest. So, all right, let's get to trivia. Dave, you ready?
Yes, I am ready. Ezra in the live chat was kind of inspiration for this question, and I'll tell you why after I ask the question. Okay. Last year, the Steelers kind of spread the ball around somewhat decently. They had 4 main wide receivers with Juju Smith-Schuster, Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, James Washington. Okay. We all know how they were doing that. And you're like, oh, well, even if you lose one, you got the others, blah, blah, blah. Here's the question. The Steelers had just under 1,000 offensive snaps last year. How many snaps do you think those 4 played on the field at the same time? I went through all the personnel groupings and looked at every single one and totaled it up. How many times those guys played on the field, all 4 of them together. We're not going to do prices right. It's not closest without going over. Let's see who's closest.
Oh,
wait, we might have breaking news.
Oh,
from Michael
Beck. Breaking news. It's not breaking news.
The outlaw might be available. We knew it was coming. It just hadn't been made official yet.
T. James caught the ball.
Yeah, so Jesse James might be out there in the free agent market. So, all right, go ahead. Sorry. How many snaps do you think those 4
how many overall? How many? Yeah.
It was
how
900
snaps were there on offense?
60 something or 990 something. It was less than 1,000, but more than 950.
Oh my gosh. I have no idea.
And then you got Jeff. Jeff looks frozen, or he's really thinking hard. No. So I think Jeff is frozen. What did you say, Bryan?
I'm going to go with 87.
Jeff's going to go with 87
for Sidney Crosby. The Penguins won tonight.
Oh, did they win? They were leading going into the third. Bryan, what did you say?
Yes, 5-2.
I said 80.
You said 80, and Jeff said 87. Well, I'm going to say if it was Price is Right rules, you were both wrong. Okay. Are you ready?
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah.
4. Those 4 players were on the field for a total altogether of 4 offensive snaps.
There you go.
Because this was inspiration because Ezra had said on Saturday's Touchdown Under that the Steelers tight end doesn't matter because they play 4 wide receivers all the time. They only played 54 snaps with 4 wide receivers last year. And the 4 snaps wasn't even a 4 wide receiver set. It was 5 when it was with Ray. So those 4 players and Eric Ebron never stepped foot on the field together on offense last year for the Steelers. Personally, I think that's a mistake, but I think that mistake is gone.
All right. That's good trivia. Is that it for you?
That's it, man.
All right.
That was a long time looking up that number.
I bet. Brian,
It took me about a half an hour after Scobro show, and he was helping me look at it.
Yes, I do. So this is a situation where this week you're seeing the Steelers deciding not to put any franchise tags on anybody is what it seems to be so far.
Well, and it's over. They can't.
Yes. Well,
yeah.
And so once again, the last franchise tag to be placed on a Steeler was
Bud Dupree.
Bud Dupree. So when we are talking about transition or franchise tags, it has been done a total of 11 times since they have been doing tags. Two of those players have had the tag put on them twice. So who are the two players that the Steelers have put some kind of tag on them on more than one occasion?
Bud Dupree. And
Le'Veon
Bell.
They only tagged Bud once.
They used his 5th-year option. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yes.
So Le'Veon Bell's one.
Le'Veon Bell
2 years in a row.
Mm-hmm.
The other person,
franchise. How long have they been doing the franchise?
I don't feel like that's been that long.
Was that from nine? Was it in the nine? Was that when the salary cap came in, like in '94? Not,
94.
94. Okay. Someone else that they. Oh, we're just naming who's done it multiple times, right?
Yeah, there's only two players that have been tagged in some sort of fashion more than once.
Okay, there. Let's go with who's someone who would have been. Did they ever do it with Alan Faneca?
No, he is. It has never been done.
Okay,
Plexico Burris.
Nope.
No, I don't think he was. I'm trying. I'm guessing it's someone from the 90s. I'm guessing it's in the 90s. Okay. Am I right that it's in the 90s?
No, it is in the 2000s.
In the 2000s. Okay. Then let's see. Lineman from the 2000s. Jeff, I don't got it. If it's a lineman.
Marvell Smith.
Jeff, you've had him on your show before.
Is it Max Starks? Was he twice?
Max
Starks.
Twice.
Ah.
I know he was once. I didn't realize he was. I should have guessed it since I knew he was once.
So of those 9 taggees, what position do you think was the predominant position?
I'm going to say outside linebacker because I know that they did Dupree. Jason Worlds was a transition tag. So I'm thinking there might be another one there that I'm missing. So I'm going to say outside linebacker.
It is linebacker, outside linebacker as well. Gilden was one, Jason Gilden, and the other one would have been Lamar Woodley.
Okay.
So
was he a transition or franchise?
Lamar Woodley, I believe, was a franchise tag, but I don't have that exact. So of the other guys, I could have you guess those other players. The very first one was in 1994, and it was on the offensive side of the ball.
1994.
Barry Foster.
That's a good guess, but that is incorrect.
94. I'm gonna let's see. I know it was never Ben Roethlisberger. What's that? 94, of course. Let's go with. Let's go. Did they ever use it on Eric Green?
They did, and it was Eric Green was the very first one in 94. In 95, he ended up signing with the Miami Dolphins. The other players, I'll just throw them out here real quick, unless you want to guess, but we'll just throw them out.
Did they ever use it on a wide receiver?
They did not.
Okay.
They never used it on a wide receiver.
Okay.
Let's have some fun with this. The other one, we've got one on defense, one on special teams, and actually, everybody else has been mentioned. So there's 2 other guys, and one on defense and one on special teams.
Colin Holba, obviously. I mean,
Yeah. I mean, that's a given.
Dick Shiner, right?
yeah.
Dick Shiner was a quarterback.
So I think you were actually starting to say it was Carnell Lake, right?
Carnell Lake, yes.
Okay.
And your special teamer,
Jeff Reed.
he spent all the money repaying sheets. It was Jeff Reed.
Reed.
I would have guessed Reed if I had to make a guess. So yeah.
There you go. That was my Dave Schofield trivia, because I feel like I went down the Dave well and I had fun doing that one.
I'm not happy unless there's an answer that's Dick Shiner or Colin Holba, one or the other. So I don't know if Colin Holba's in the league. I would love to have him on the show. Get him, Michael Beck, get Colin Holba on the show. I just want to ask him what in the heck he was thinking when all of a sudden he got a call in the 6th round. Like, what? I just got drafted? Are you serious?
No, you know what the most impressive thing about Colin Holba is? He will always go down in the Steelers record book. You know that? He won their home run derby during training camp.
Did he?
Yes, he did.
He is currently with Duck Hodges in Los Angeles. Now, Dick Shiner is
Dick
no
Shiner
longer
will
with us.
be with us. No,
Dick Shiner's. No.
Wait till I tell you what. That is the next. If you guys want to throw in some money, so I can go ahead and get Jeff the throwback Dick Shiner jersey, number 17. That's going to show up one of these days.
I'm going to get it framed and just have it behind me. So during shows, you just see Shiner.
What would be even better is if you put first names on the front and last names on the back.
I don't want to go down the road. I want to go down next, but it would be great to have a Shiner jersey right next to your bald head.
Oh goodness! All right, let's do some final thoughts here. Bryan, go ahead. What's your final thought for the week?
Guys, it's about to get crazy. This is our silly season. You know, it's kind of like Black Friday, and this is Christmas, so it's getting ready to happen. You know, stick with BTSC because we're gonna have a lot of news first. Our ears are going to be ringing on the BTSC side when you just hear bing, 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 because that's happening for us. And every time a bing rings means that BTSC has some news.
Dave Schofield, final thoughts. I'd love to say that it's going to be next week that we're going to know some of this stuff in the first 2 days of free agency, of official free agency after the 2 days of tampering. Don't know if we're going to have it by next Thursday, but if not, I'm saying definitely the next one, but it could even be close that we're going to see the Steelers do what they need to do. And it's what it's going to do more than anything is shape the Steelers draft needs going into the month of April, that we might be looking at the draft in a completely different manner in a week from now.
I agree. John Knox gives us wrong one. Sorry. $5. He says Bryan deserves some dough for that ball joke. That was amazing. Go Shiner. Gotta love the Dick Shiner jokes for sure.
I tell you what,
go big or go home.
Fat guys should not be making fun of bald guys, but I had to do it.
Hey, it is what it is. All right, folks. So next week, Thursday, we'll be back on the Steelers preview, talking about maybe some free agent pickups, maybe some free agent losses. I guarantee there'll be some free agent losses. So we'll have lots to talk about. Make sure you check us out. Also, wherever you get your podcasts, or Steelers or Behind the Steel Curtain, subscribe or follow, do whatever you have to do so you don't miss a thing. And as always, BehindTheSteelCurtain.com should be your one-stop shop for all things Steelers. Dave, why don't you send us out?
Hey.
See you next week, folks.